Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, into a time when winter didn't just nip at your nose. It sank its teeth into your very soul. You're in a one-room thatched hut somewhere in 14th century England. Outside, the snow drifts, are chest deep, and the wind howls like it's trying to claw its way in. Inside, it's not much warmer. No fireplace, no insulation, no tech. Not even a candle most nights. You've got 3 layers of scratchy wool, a blanket that smells suspiciously like goat, and a straw mattress that crunches when you move. And still, you shiver. Because let's be real, you probably wouldn't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're watching. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge home at dusk. Not late, but already your hands are stiff and purple, your breath forming thick little ghosts in the air. The sun's been gone 5 minutes, and the entire village has entered a kind of semi-hibernation mode. Chickens squawk as you pass, agitated by the cold. Your boots, thin leather patches sewn with hope and pig gut, offer no protection from the icy slop beneath them. Your hut is close. You see the faint glow of tallow candles flickering through rough wooden slats. Smoke rises from only 2 roofs. Lucky devils. Most homes like yours lack a true fireplace. Sure, there's a hearth of sorts, just a circle of stones and ash on the dirt floor. No chimney, though. Fire smoke curls upward and just sort of hangs out, giving you free seasoning for your lungs. On colder nights, you might light it briefly for cooking, but keeping it going all night is a luxury you can't afford. Wood is scarce, and it's strictly rationed for those who aren't nobility or clergy. You step inside. The heat, minimal. There's a damp smell of old hay, human sweat, and something vaguely fungal. Home sweet home. You stomp your feet to wake up your blood. The packed earth floor is nearly as hard as the stones outside. In one corner, your mother stirs a pot of what might generously be called stew. Turnips, dried peas, and something that once lived. Maybe. The warmth from the pot is almost insulting, like a candle flickering in a cave. A dog curls up near the embers, probably the warmest creature in the hut. You envy it. Dogs weren't just pets in the medieval world. They were working animals, bed warmers, pest control, and occasionally emergency meat, though we don't talk about that. Your siblings huddle under a shared cloth near the bed, a bed being a too kind word for a wooden frame piled with straw, rags, and hope. One historical record from 1322 described a peasant family using woven nettle cloth and sheep's fleece sewn into sacks to sleep in, essentially a medieval sleeping bag, minus the waterproofing and the concept of personal space. You shed your outer tunic, soaked from the snow, and hang it near the door, which is really just a slab of wood propped in place. Wind whistles through the gaps in the walls, and you stuff a wool scrap into the biggest crack. It helps. Kind of. Not really. You sit and eat, steam from the stew briefly defrosting your nose. Someone farts. It steams too. Here's the real kicker. This isn't even the coldest part of the night. That's coming around 3 or 4 a.m., when the embers are gone and your body heat has barely held the line. Medieval nights were brutal not just because of the temperature, but because there was nothing to interrupt them. No electric lights, no smartphones. Just long hours of darkness, boredom, and the slow, creeping chill that wrapped itself around your spine and whispered, "You're not gonna make it." You'd think a society this vulnerable would invent better heating, right? Well, they tried. Sort of. Wealthy folks had fireplaces and tapestries, layers upon layers of cloth meant to block drafts and show off. But for you, the average peasant, a fireplace was as distant as a Mars mission. Historians still argue whether rural peasants used central fire pits in a communal setting versus strictly individual hearths per family. What's clear is that most huts had no effective way to keep heat in or cold out. You get up to check the goat. She's asleep, curled near the hay pile. Her warmth is precious. You throw a blanket over her, half out of compassion, half out of strategy. She might be your best chance at a semi-warm night. It's now pitch black outside, and the kind of silence has settled in that makes you hear your own heartbeat. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls. Closer still, your neighbor coughs. Loudly. Twice. You hope it's just a cold and not something worse. Illness travels faster in winter, and faster still when everyone's breathing the same recirculated goat air. You retreat to your side of the bed, more like a shared mound of lumpy straw, and slide under a heavy woolen cover that smells like smoke, wet dog, and your great-aunt's feet. It's better than nothing. Maybe. You curl up tight, fetal position, hands between thighs. Everyone's body heat matters. The baby gets the warmest spot near the middle. You get the outer edge, cold and risky, but you're young and strong. And allegedly resilient. You'll be fine or not. But hey, you made it through another day. That's something. And now it's time to sleep, or at least try. You wake up to something scratching your leg. Not a nightmare, not a rat either. Just a flea making itself at home in the one place you wish it wouldn't. You swat absent-mindedly and pull the coarse wool blanket up tighter around your neck. It's not that it's warm under here. It's just less freezing. You don't get out of bed, not yet. Not unless it's absolutely necessary. The air bites at every exposed inch of skin, like it holds a personal grudge. So you lie there, staring into the dark and think about clothes. Because in winter, your clothes are your life. Literally. Let's start with what you're wearing. A linen shirt that hasn't been properly washed since summer. Over that, a coarse wool tunic. And over that, another tunic. If you're lucky, one of them is thick. And if you're really lucky, you've got hose. Or better yet, two mismatched pairs layered like medieval leggings, one inside out so the seams don't rub too much. Your shoes. Barely better than sacks. Your gloves? What? Gloves, and here's the secret. You never fully undress. Why would you? Clothes are too valuable and way too hard to replace. You sleep in what you wore during the day. Sometimes you even add layers to sleep, especially if the night's air is thick with frost. Of course, that means by January, you're marinating in your own human broth. People in this era believed that washing too often could let disease in through the pores, especially in winter, when warm water was scarce and cold water was self-harm. So, instead of bathing, they leaned into layers, extra layers, funky layers, lice-loved-it layers. You scratch again. Here's a little-known tidbit. In some rural villages, people would sew themselves into their winter clothes. That's right, fully stitched in. No plans to remove them until April. Think of it as the original onesie, just with fleas, mud, and existential dread. Now, clothing wasn't just about comfort, it was also social survival. A fraying hem might tell a neighbor you're barely scraping by. A patch of rabbit fur sewn at the cuffs? Fancy. Not noble fancy, but maybe I got a decent dowry fancy. Your outermost layer, especially the hood or coif that wrapped your head and neck, was practically a second identity, and then there's the bedmate calculus. Yes, you share your bed. Always. Not because you're particularly affectionate, though hey, maybe you are, but because body heat is the only kind of central heating you've got. The average peasant family crams 5 to 8 people onto a single sleeping platform. Elders at one end, children in the middle, and everyone else slotted in like warmish sardines. Sometimes you even rotate who sleeps next to whom, because one guy's got garlic breath and another snores like a medieval chainsaw. Romance? Good luck. Nothing says mood killer like your mother-in-law farting under the shared blanket. But don't scoff too hard. There was a method to this madness. In some communities, a courting couple would be allowed to sleep side by side with a bundling board between them, a literal plank of wood. You'd talk, snuggle, a little, and maybe imagine a future that didn't include livestock as third wheels. Historians still argue whether bundling actually prevented, well, you know, or if it just gave nosy parents peace of mind. Either way, it's a reminder that even intimacy had to work around the cold. You roll over and groan. The straw beneath you crunches audibly. You've already picked out the pokiest bits earlier, but there's always a rogue stalk waiting to, jab you in the ribs. It's not so much a bed as a sleep-themed endurance challenge. You dream of feathers, of soft linen sheets warmed by a fire, and wake up to someone's foot in your face. Your younger brother mumbles something in his sleep. You can see his breath hanging in the air, each exhale a frozen puff of mortality. You can't feel your nose anymore. You pull your hood down over your face, trapping what little warmth you've got. It smells like unwashed hair and sheep grease. You sigh. Tomorrow, you'll air out your clothes near the fire, if there's a fire. Just hanging them up gets some of the stink out. Not all of it, of course, but enough that you'll convince yourself it's fine. You'll shake them out too, hoping to dislodge a few fleas. Spoiler. The fleas always win. There's a weird little tradition in your village. Midwinter, on the coldest night, someone tells the story of the frost spirits that live in the folds of your clothing. They're tiny creatures who feed on human laziness, so if you don't stitch your hems or patch your socks, they sneak in and make you colder as punishment. Total nonsense. Still, you mend that rip in your sleeve the next day, just in case. Clothing is your second skin. It holds heat, keeps lice close but the wind closer, and silently whispers, "You're still alive." You remember your neighbor's boy, fell into the stream last winter, never got dry, died of fever by the next night. He had only one tunic. You have 3. You're practically royalty. You hug yourself tighter and let your mind drift. Not quite. Sleep. Not yet. Just floating in that strange medieval limbo. Half dreaming, half cold. Wondering if morning will ever come. It will. But not soon. It's the middle of the night now. That eerie kind of deep night where time doesn't feel real anymore. You're half awake, half frozen, and you've repositioned yourself 5 times trying to find a warmer patch in the straw. There isn't one. Every surface is equally unwelcoming. Every breath you take is visible, Your nostrils sting. You tuck your hands between your thighs again, the way you've learned to do without thinking. Your body has adapted to this world. Sort of. You've learned to sleep in shifts, to wake when the fire needs stoking or someone kicks you in their sleep. But sleep here is different. It's not one long stretch. It comes in two halves, first sleep and second sleep. Between them is a strange, wakeful hour when you lie there staring at the darkness, sometimes thinking, sometimes talking, sometimes other things. You shift again. Someone nearby coughs, a dry, hacking sound. Another voice mumbles. Then silence. This middle-of-the-night wakefulness is so common, it has its own rhythm. Historians still argue whether it was caused by poor sleeping, conditions, or simply a natural pattern when nights are 15 hours long. Either way, you don't fight it. No one does. You sit up quietly, careful not to jostle the others. You wrap a spare cloth around your shoulders and tiptoe toward the hearth. There's barely a glow left in the ashes. You blow gently, coaxing a dull red to pulse beneath the gray. It's not enough for a flame, but maybe, just maybe, enough to warm your fingers for a few blessed seconds. You cup your hands around the dying heat and let your thoughts wander. Here's something they don't tell you in school. The middle of the night was often social time in the medieval world. If you're a servant in a manor, you might sneak to the kitchen and nibble leftover crusts. If you're a mother, you might nurse a child. If you're a shepherd, you might be out checking on your flock. Yes, even at 3 a.m. in the snow with wolves lurking. And if you're just a tired, frozen peasant like you might whisper to whoever else is awake. Little things, family news, gossip, or prayers. Lots of prayers. When the night is this dark and cold, even skeptics hedge their bets with a whispered Our Father. You walk to the wall and gently lift the hide curtain covering the window. Outside, the village is cloaked in a blue-tinged frost. Moonlight glints off icy rooftops. It's silent. Even the dogs have given up. A thin layer of hoarfrost has crept across the inner window ledge, and you trace a finger through it before shivering violently and letting the curtain fall. Back to your bed. As you lie down, your skin touches a patch of straw colder than the surface of a saint's tomb. You yelp softly. Someone stirs. The dog groans. But eventually the air warms by a degree or two, maybe from your own body heat, maybe from your proximity to your sibling's armpit. It's enough. You settle into what's hopefully your second sleep. Of course you dream. You always do in this second stretch of the night. Some scholars think it's the time when medieval folks were most imaginative, when they heard voices, saw visions, or dreamt up solutions to daily problems. You just dream of boots that don't leak and a blanket that doesn't smell like feet. Then the rooster screams. It's not even dawn. Just that annoying limbo where the sky goes from deep space black to haunted blue. But that rooster doesn't care. You groan. Your limbs ache, not just from the cold, but from the rough surface you've slept on. Your back feels like it's been folded in half like a church pew. Someone's already up. Probably your mother. She moves about the room with that quiet urgency only a medieval woman has, grabbing dried peas, checking water buckets, setting out the daily bread rations like she's distributing treasure. Here's the quirky bit. You don't eat breakfast right away. That's a modern thing. Back then, most peasants had just 2 meals, midday and evening. But if the cold is biting hard, you might get a bite of pottage or a hunk of rye bread to chew on while you start chores, and start you must. The cold waits for no one. You roll out of bed, more of a fall, really, and your bare feet slap the icy ground. Your shoes are stiff, almost frozen in shape. You beat them against each other, shove your feet inside, and curse under your breath. PG rated, of course. You're still in medieval England. Your first task? Fetch water. Of course it is. The well's a 5-minute walk, but that walk feels like a Siberian expedition. You pass a neighbor's hut and see someone else bundling up, hood on, scarf tight, eyes squinting like they're about to face battle. Which, in a way, they are. Your fingers are already going numb. You haven't even reached the well. Let's pause here. Think about this. No gloves, no waterproof boots, no coat as you'd recognize it. You've got wool and layers and luck. That's it. Surviving the cold was a mix of routine and sheer stubbornness. You don't let yourself think about how your fingers sting or how your nose feels wooden. You just keep walking. At the well, the bucket is frozen to the beam. You chip it loose with the end of your belt buckle. When it finally drops into the dark, slushy water below, you exhale like you've won a war. You crank the handle slowly, your muscles protesting with every turn. The bucket comes up glistening, full of slush and bone-chilling cold. You carry it back, arms trembling, but you do it. Because it's your job. Because no one else will. Because this is how you survive. And as you re-enter your home, breath steaming, arms aching, you catch a whiff of the morning stew, more water than anything, but warm. And suddenly it doesn't feel quite so hopeless, just cold, very, very cold. By the time the sun finally drags itself over the horizon, you're already exhausted. Not emotionally, well, okay, maybe a little, but physically, the cold just wears you down. Every motion is a small rebellion against nature. You've fetched the water. You've helped shake the frost off the livestock's hay. You've avoided stepping in anything you'd regret, which, in a medieval village, is basically a full-time job. You glance at the sky. It's a gray sheet of damp wool, the kind of sky that never quite brightens, the kind that just hovers above you like a bad omen with commitment issues. But it's time for the real work to begin, because no matter how cold it is, chores don't. Wait. You head to the barn, or what your family generously calls a barn. It's more of a lean-to, propped up by whatever wood you could scavenge before winter settled in. Inside, the cow gives you a look. Not grateful, not affectionate. Just that blank, judgy cow expression that says, "You again?" You brush the frost from her flank and get to milking, your hands stiff and slow. The warmth from her body is actually kind of comforting, which is weird to admit. But this is the cold season. Standards have plummeted. A lukewarm cow. Practically a spa day. The animals don't complain, mainly because they can't. But they suffer too. That cow. She's producing half what she did in autumn. The chickens are barely laying. The pigs are, well, they're just pigs. Useless. In cold weather, until it's time to eat them. And here's a mainstream historical fact you might not have heard in school. The agricultural calendar didn't stop in winter. It just turned mean. Tasks were fewer, but harder. Wood had to be chopped, and always by hand. If you didn't chop enough, you froze. If you chopped too much, your back gave out. You can almost hear your future self complaining about your spine. You pull your hood tighter and push open the garden gate. Not that there's a garden right now. Just a few frost-bitten cabbages clinging to life. Winter vegetables were your best shot at fresh nutrition. Onions, leeks, maybe some kale if the deer hadn't eaten it first. Root cellars helped a little, but not everyone had them, and they were often more mud than miracle. You dig into the frozen earth with a stick, because of course your hoe snapped last week. If you're lucky, you'll pry up a limp parsnip. If you're really lucky, you'll find one that doesn't look like a medieval goblin foot. Dinner. Meanwhile, you're still cold. The kind of cold that creeps under your fingernails and just squats there. The kind of cold that makes your teeth ache even when you're not chewing. But you keep moving, because that's how you stay alive. Movement equals warmth. Sit too long and you're just a wool-wrapped popsicle. And if you're a kid, forget snowball fights. You're working too. Maybe you're collecting firewood, what's left of it anyway, or chasing off crows, or fetching snow to melt for water when the well freezes solid, which happens a lot. Back in the house, someone's blowing on their hands again. Someone else is muttering about frost spirits. And here's a quirky little belief from the period. Some villagers thought if you whistled indoors during a deep freeze, it would summon the ice demons. Not demons, just nature spirits who really hated warm toes. So you don't whistle. Ever. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were superstitions born of boredom or actual attempts to make sense of nature's cruelty. Either way, they stuck. And when you're desperate, any explanation will do. You drop your frozen vegetables, 2 onions and something unidentifiable, onto the table. Your mother nods solemnly, like you've returned from a successful hunt, which, in a way, you have. She scrapes last night's stew into a pot and throws in your meager findings. It'll boil all day over a fire that's more ash than flame, but by evening, it might taste like something vaguely edible. If you're lucky, someone found a bone to add for flavor. Not meat, just bone. You sit on the bench near the hearth, leaning toward the warmth. Not too close, or the sparks might catch your tunic. And yes, that's happened before. You still have the singe marks to prove it. Let's talk heating, because, spoiler alert, you don't really have any. Most peasant homes had a central hearth, just a shallow pit with a fire in the middle of the room. No chimney. The smoke was supposed to rise and escape through a hole in the roof, but let's be honest. It mostly swirled around your head like a smoky aura of misery. Your eyes sting constantly. You cough a lot. And yet the fire is still your favorite, part of the house. You've probably heard of fireplaces. Nobles had them. You do not. What you have is a pile of damp logs and some smoldering regrets. So how do you stay warm without heat? You share body warmth. You never stop moving. You drink hot broth even when it tastes like leather. You wrap your feet in rags. You curl up on top of each other like puppies in a cardboard box. And you pray. A lot. Some evenings, someone will read a passage from a Bible, if you're lucky enough to know someone literate. Or they'll just recite something from memory. A parable, a psalm, or an old local tale. The rhythm of it fills the room like soft insulation. You drift toward sleep again, but not before laying your outer clothes near the hearth. Not too close, or they'll scorch. Not too far, or they'll freeze. It's a dance. Everything in this season is. Outside, the wind howls like it knows your name. You pull your hood down over your eyes, lean your head against your sibling's shoulder, and listen to the fire hiss its sleepy lullaby. And even though you're cold, still always cold, you made it through another day. Morning again, or something like it. The light that filters through the high-draped window isn't golden or warm. It's more like beige despair. But you're used to that now. Winter mornings don't come in color. They arrive in fog and frozen breath, in boots that don't bend and socks that never dry. You sit up slowly, joints creaking like an old church pew. Your hair crackles with static from the straw. You scratch the side of your head, glance at the icy sheen along the interior wall, and try not to think about the frozen mouse you saw last night in the corner. Poor thing didn't make it to spring. You're trying to be tougher than the mouse. Today's nay. Plan, survive. Again. But now it's Sunday, and that means something different. Even in winter, even in bone-splintering cold, the village musters for Mass. Because souls, unlike feet, cannot be left unattended. And while you might be wearing the same undergarments as yesterday, probably the same ones all week, your cloak is brushed off and your boots are wiped. It's time to appear halfway presentable for God. Of course, the walk to church is its own medieval obstacle course. You shuffle along the icy path with the rest of the villagers, huddling together for warmth and traction. The air is so cold, it feels like a punishment. And speaking of punishment, remember that guy from the next village over? He skipped Mass 3 times last winter, got fined and publicly shamed. Which, considering he's also missing 3 toes, feels a bit much. The church looms ahead, its stone walls covered in frost. Inside it's not exactly cozy, just colder than your house in a more majestic way. Stone floors, stone walls, and just enough draft to remind you of your sins. But Mass is more than worship. It's a check-in, a human connection, a village. Status update. Who's still alive? Who's got chilblains? Who's not so secretly pregnant? You catch a few whispers and side-eyes as you slip onto a bench near the back, your teeth chattering like you've swallowed castanets. The priest arrives. He's wrapped in layers of wool and speaks Latin, which you mostly don't understand. But you nod when you're supposed to. You kneel, you stand, you cross yourself. You pray. Not just for salvation, but for warmth. And for spring. Sweet, muddy, bug-filled spring. Historians still argue whether medieval folks found real comfort in these rituals or whether it was just habit. But today, you're grateful for the familiar rhythm. And for the brief illusion that you're warmer among others, even if it's just body heat and wishful thinking. After Mass, the chatter starts. People cluster in the courtyard, stomping their feet and rubbing hands together like half-frozen pigeons. You hear rumors? Someone's chimney collapsed, someone else's pig froze in its pen, and old Joan down by the stream says she saw a wolf. Again. She always sees a wolf. There's also a quirky local tradition that crops up around this time of year. Ice blessings. The priest might walk the edges of the village with a vial of holy water, sprinkling it at doorways and muttering prayers to keep the frost demons at bay. Does it work? Who knows? But nobody skips it. Especially after what happened last winter, We don't talk about that. You trudge home, clutching your cloak tight, stepping carefully to avoid the ice slicks that form on shaded parts of the path. You pass your neighbor's hut and see smoke. A good sign. They've got wood. You wonder if they'd trade some for eggs. Then remember, your chickens are on a laying strike again. Freeloaders. Back home, your mother is preparing Sunday stew. It's mostly the same as weekday stew, just with more imagination. Maybe she's tossed in a crushed garlic clove. Maybe someone found a wrinkled apple in the root basket. Either way, you sit close to the hearth and inhale deeply. It smells edible, and that's a win. While it simmers, you and your father mend tools by the firelight. Not because it's fun, because everything breaks faster in the cold, handles split, blades crack, ropes fray like they've been chewed on by invisible mice. You run your fingers along a repaired pitchfork and wince at a splinter. It's always something. Later, you haul a frozen log from the pile outside and slam it onto the hearth. Sparks leap. The fire groans like it's being woken up from a nap. It earned. The log hisses and steams, proof that it's far too wet to be helpful. But it's what you've got. You settle in for the afternoon. No, not with a blanket and a book. You don't own a book. You sit and sew. You twist wool into thread. You carve pegs for the door. You patch your sleeve for the third time this month. Idle hands are the devil's tools, someone mutters. You roll your eyes, then keep sewing. Outside, the sky darkens. The wind picks up. You hear it whistle through the gaps in the walls like it's searching for something. You stuff more straw into the cracks. Someone sneezes violently, and no one says bless you, partly because no one's feeling particularly blessed. You eat your stew in silence, except for the occasional slurp. It's hot, and that's what matters. You let it warm your insides, like a candle in a jar. For 5 blissful minutes, you forget that your toes are numb. You think about the week ahead, the chores, the biting cold, the shrinking supplies, and that one sheep that looks a little too slow to survive February. You light a tallow candle, not because you need it, you've memorized every creak and groove in the house, but because it feels human. It throws a little golden circle onto the table, and you pretend you live in luxury, just for a minute. And then it's bedtime. Again. You pile into bed with your siblings, feet tangled, backs pressed together, heads under the same rough wool blanket. No pillow, just your arm, bent uncomfortably under your neck. You exhale slowly. The straw rustles, the dog farts, a perfect winter lullaby. You made it through another Sunday. Sleep comes in layers, not because you're so relaxed, but because every few hours the cold pulls you halfway awake. You shift, you tug the blanket tighter. Someone beside you mutters and rolls over. You think about getting up to pee, then decide. Your bladder can suffer until sunrise. You drift again, not into dreams, but into a sort of medieval limbo, where your body sleeps but your cold nose stays alert. When morning finally shows up, it's not with a gentle ray of light or bird song. Nope. It's the sharp crack of ice breaking in the wash basin, the sound of your father spitting into the hearth to check if it's still hot, and your mother already muttering about how low the flour is. You stretch, but carefully. Your joints aren't. Big fans of sub-zero nights. The only thing more dangerous than the cold right now is staying still too long. You know that by instinct. You also know that hunger is the next thing on today's to-do list. And this morning, the cupboard is looking ambitious. There's half a loaf of barley bread, a nub of cheese that smells suspiciously alive, and something that may have once been a pear. No one's full this time of year, but no one expects to be. That's not the game. The game is, how long can we make this food last? Here's your mainstream historical fact for the morning. In medieval Europe, the coldest part of winter often hit hardest after the feast-heavy holiday season. January and February were known as the starving months. Grain stores ran low, salted meat was nearly gone, and fresh anything? Forget it. Your family gathers to eat what could generously be called breakfast. You chew slowly, because the slower you chew, the more it feels like you're having a real meal. The bread is stale enough to double as a weapon. The cheese makes your tongue itch a little, but it's food. Kind of. And while we're being honest, yes, your meals are incredibly repetitive. Stew, bread, maybe a boiled onion if you're feeling wild. You'd cry, but it'd probably freeze on your cheek. What makes it even more frustrating is that you can't just go out and buy food even if you had coins, which, let's be real, you don't. The manorial system means you owe your lord a portion of everything you produce, and he's not giving anything back in return. Unless you count passive-aggressive sermons and taxes as charity. But then comes the moment that makes your stomach twist a little harder. Ration time. Your mother pulls a cloth bag from the chest and opens it like it holds some ancient treasure. Inside, grains, barley, oats, a bit of dried rye. She fingers through it with practiced care, measuring with her eyes, whispering under her breath. You watch her decide, silently, whether there's enough for porridge today, or if it's better saved for tomorrow. She decides yes. You feel weirdly proud of that win. And here's where things get quirky. Some families believed you could protect your pantry from spoilage by hanging a charm made from woven straw, shaped like a sunwheel. It was supposed to keep evil spirits, or mice, out of the grain. Yours hangs on the beam above the chest, slightly crooked. No one's really sure if it works, but no one dares throw it out. Historians still argue whether these food charms were more about pagan leftovers or just early attempts at mold prevention with flair. Either way, it's there, and you don't question it. You might even whisper a thank you to it when no one's watching. Mid-morning arrives, and you're out. Again, this time with a basket. You're foraging. Yes, in the snow. No, it's not glamorous. It's mostly a game of squinting at the base of trees, flipping over frozen leaves, and praying something edible reveals itself. Wild onions, maybe. Bittercress. A mushroom if you're feeling risky and reckless. Today, you find nothing. You trudge home with a basket full of disappointment and snow clumps on your boots. Your fingers feel like they've been individually cursed. You stop halfway back and blow warm breath into your cupped hands, even though it only helps for 5 seconds at a time. When you return, your sister is trying to grind flour with a hand quern, basically 2 heavy stones that eat knuckles for breakfast. It's slow, it's painful, and the flour it produces is gritty enough to strip paint. But it'll make flatbread. That's what counts. You help knead the dough, your fingers stiff. The flour sticks under your nails. You wonder how your ancestors managed to not go absolutely insane with the lack of flavor. Then your mother adds a pinch of herbs, dried last summer, and suddenly the room smells almost festive. You eat lunch, such as it is, and then it's chore time again. You help your brother break apart a chunk of frozen manure to spread over the garden plot. Because yes, even poop has purpose in the cold season. You scrape it into a sack, muttering under your breath the whole time, and try not to slip on the icy mud. By late afternoon, the family regroups indoors. You warm your hands over the hearth, carefully, and listen while your father talks about how cold winters used to be even worse, which sounds like a lie but might not be. He talks about the winter of the wolves, where people claimed they saw packs come down into the village. You shiver, not from fear, from memory. A cousin shows up just before dusk, stomping snow off his boots, looking like he's aged 5 years in 1 week. He brings dried turnips and a joke so bad it actually makes your father laugh. For 5 minutes, the house feels lighter, warmer. Then he leaves, and the wind rushes in behind him like an uninvited guest. Evening again. And that means supper, which is a thinner version of lunch, which was a lazier version of breakfast. But it's hot. It counts. Before bed, your mother wraps a cloth around the remaining food bag. She tucks it under a stool. She straightens the straw charm above it. She lights a candle and mumbles something about getting us through next week. You cross yourself, just in case. You curl into bed again, the same way you always do, back to back, knees tucked, nose under the wool. You've gotten used to sleeping in clothes. You don't even notice the straw poking you anymore. And as you close your eyes, you don't think about hunger, or cold, or even wolves. You think about the herb in the flatbread, about the fire's soft crackle, about the way the candlelight flickered when your cousin laughed. You're still hungry, still cold, but you're here. You wake before the sun, though it's hard to tell if the sun ever really rises in February. The air bites harder today. Your breath steams out in clouds that look like you're exhaling ghosts. The blanket feels like a slab of wood. Your limbs, stiff beneath it. You try to wriggle your toes, but they respond like disgruntled employees who've gone on strike. Today is laundry day. Yes, medieval laundry, in the middle of a winter that seems personally offended by your existence. You already know how this goes. Icy water, lye soap, and a level of suffering that should probably be documented by a bard. First, you gear up. Wool shawl, check. Cloak, check. Ragged mittens with holes in all the strategic places, check. Then, the walk to the stream. It's not far, but every step is a betrayal. The path is slick, and the basket of filthy clothes cuts into your hip as you trudge through snowdrifts. By the time you reach the stream, your eyelashes are frozen. The water is, no surprise, frigid. It cuts through your gloves like knives. You break through the top layer of ice with a stick, revealing a dark, swirling current underneath. It's probably cleaner than what you're wearing, but just barely. You get to work. Shirts, shifts, under things stiff with weeks of use. You dunk, scrub, wring, repeat. The soap is homemade, lye mixed with ashes and animal fat. It works in theory. Mostly it just makes your hands burn and smell vaguely like bacon. Here's your mainstream historical fact of the day. Medieval peasants didn't wash clothes often in winter, not because they didn't want to, but because wet clothing took forever to dry and might freeze solid on the line. But eventually, even the dirtiest tunic starts whispering for salvation. And here's a delightfully weird tidbit. Some folks believed washing clothes on certain days, like Thursdays, invited bad luck. Others hung sprigs of juniper on wash baskets to ward off spirits who might curse the water. You glance at your own laundry bundle. No juniper. Welp, good luck to you, peasant. The wind picks up, slicing through your layers like an annoyed butcher. Your fingers go numb again. You kneel in the snow and mutter things that wouldn't be allowed in church. The only comfort is that everyone's in the same frozen boat. Your neighbors at the far end of the stream, slapping shirts on a rock, and singing a song so off-key that even the crows stop to stare. Once you're done, you haul the sodden clothes into your basket. They weigh more now, because of course, they're carrying tiny glaciers inside them. The walk back is worse. Your shoulders scream, your toes go fully dead, and a stiff wind punches you directly in the nose. Back at the house, you string up a drying line inside, near the hearth. That's the trick. If you can't dry them outside, you let the smoke and warmth indoors do the job. Slowly. Like, watch paint dry slow. It also means your entire home now smells like damp wool and smoky bacon. Congratulations. You take a moment to reheat your hands over the fire. You hold them close, too close. A spark jumps, and you hiss, pulling back just in time. You flex your fingers. They're red, raw, and slightly pruny from scrubbing. Your mother offers you a mug of warm ale. Not fresh, of course. It's been sitting by the hearth all morning, but it's liquid, and it's not cold. That qualifies as luxury. You sip and let the heat crawl down your throat like a sleepy cat. Then comes the debate. Some scholars argue whether medieval peasants used snow as a laundering aid. Did they scrub with it like a natural abrasive? Or was that just a myth born from romanticized medieval imagery? You've tried it. It's cold. It melts too fast. And it doesn't clean squat. So in your opinion, those scholars can come try it themselves. With the clothes steaming gently behind you, you turn to the next chore, mending. Everything rips faster in winter. Threads snap, seams split. You've got a shirt with more patches than fabric. You thread your needle and set to work, stabbing your thumb almost immediately. Classic. The hearth crackles. The dog snores. Someone farts. Life, as always, goes on. In the corner, your little brother tries to chase a mouse that's taken up residence in the thatch. He pokes a stick toward the ceiling and yells, "Gotcha!" You glance up and see nothing, but nod in encouragement. A mouse-free house would be a miracle. Afternoon brings more food prep. You mash dried beans with a wooden pestle. They taste like chalky sorrow, but they'll fill your stomach. Your sister boils water with cabbage leaves until the air smells like regret. Still, the heat from the pot is a welcome bonus. Your father returns from chopping wood. His face is wind-burned, his beard full of ice. He brings back 2 splintered logs and 1 sarcastic comment. "Warm enough for swimming today." You laugh, but only because your jaw is finally thawed enough to move. Dinner is modest: bean mash, flatbread, and a hard-boiled egg shared between 3 people. It's not ideal, but it's food. You dip the bread in warm water to soften it, chew slowly, and dream of summer feasts you'll probably never see. The conversation turns to village gossip. Someone's goat wandered into the Lord's herb garden. Someone else's cart lost a wheel on the ice. The baker is apparently hoarding flour. Again. You lean in enjoying the small flicker of community these moments bring. The clothes still aren't dry. You poke at them, rearrange them, and wonder if you'll have to wear them damp tomorrow. You probably will, but at least they're cleaner now. Marginally. Clean enough not to offend the local saints anyway. Bedtime creeps up on you with icy fingers. The fire's low. Your feet are cold again. But you've survived another day. You made it through laundry without frostbite. You mended 2 shirts. You got a whole half egg. You lie down and wrap yourself in the same scratchy blanket, feet brushing, the newly washed tunic hanging nearby. It smells vaguely like smoke and damp sheep. But hey, it's clean. As you close your eyes, you think, this wasn't the worst day, just the coldest. So far. Morning again. Or maybe just a lighter shade of night. You're not sure anymore. The days blur together this time of year, each one like the last, a cold, damp copy of a cold, damp original. Your first thought, as always, is, where are my boots? They're near the hearth, still damp from yesterday. You slide your feet in anyway. At this point, you've made peace with the idea that dry is just a summer myth, like unicorns or warm cheese. Today's task is firewood. Not the chopping part, that's your father's battle, but the hauling, the stacking, the collecting of any pitiful twig that hasn't already been claimed by your fellow desperate villagers. It's cold enough to freeze time, and the hearth has been slowly dying overnight, so your house feels less like a home and more like a poorly insulated crypt. You head outside, dragging a sack behind you. The sun glints off the snow in that cruel, mocking way it does when it's bright, but utterly useless. You squint, you trudge. Your boots crunch through a crust of frost, and every breath stings your throat. You pass the same patch of trees, your eyes scanning the ground for fallen branches like a hawk with frostbite. You find a few, nothing substantial, but enough to fake progress. You wedge them into your sack, which is starting to feel more like an accessory than a tool. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Most peasants in the medieval period weren't allowed to cut down live trees. Woodland rights were often reserved for the lord of the manor. You could collect dead wood and kindling, but touch a living tree, and you might face fines, beatings, or worse. That tree belonged to someone richer than you. So yes, even the woods were off limits. Medieval peasants lived surrounded by nature, and yet, ironically, owned none of it. As you pause to adjust the sack on your back, you spot something strange. A bundle of brushwood shaped like a cross wedged between 2 tree roots. You recognize it as a winter ward, a folk charm meant to keep out frost demons or woodland spirits. Your grandmother used to make them. Yours never seemed to work, but she swore they kept the worst of the cold at bay. You take it with you. Back. Home. You toss your twigs by the hearth and set to breaking them apart with a rock. It's noisy, tedious work, and occasionally a piece snaps and smacks you in the face. You accept it as part of the charm. The fire needs feeding constantly. A medieval hearth is not a set-it-and-forget-it deal. You spend as much time coaxing it back to life as you do warming your fingers over it. You sit beside the fire and remember when your cousin tried to cook an egg by nestling it in the embers. It exploded, spectacularly. You found shell bits in your stew for days. You smile at the memory, then sigh as the fire sputters. Historians still argue whether peasants regularly burned dried dung alongside wood. Some say yes, especially in regions where timber was scarce. Others say it was reserved for emergencies, or when nothing else was left. In your case, well, you burned what you had. Dung, straw, dried roots. The air in your house smelled like a chimney married a farm, and you were used to it. Lunch comes and goes. Thin stew again. You dunk a hunk of stale bread, trying not to chip. A tooth. A neighbor stops by to trade news, and a handful of kindling. They heard about someone in the next village over who froze to death sitting up. Didn't even notice, just nodded off and slipped away. You all go quiet for a beat too long. After they leave, your mother pulls you aside. "We need to check the roof," she says. You groan, because checking the roof means climbing into the attic space, which is really just a glorified crawl tunnel packed with mouse droppings and despair. But if snow's piling up too much, it can collapse the whole thing. And guess who gets to find out? You. You crawl up through the low hole, splinters biting your palms. The attic smells like must and mold. You hear a skitter. You whisper a quiet, unconvincing "please stay over there" to the mouse. Your eyes adjust to the dark. You push aside the loose thatch and look. Yup. Snow. You grab the flat-ended stick your family uses for this, reach out, and start gently dislodging the heaviest patches. It slides off with a satisfying thwump, like the world exhaling. You do this a few more times, then duck back down before the cold sticks to your bones permanently. You're rewarded with another cup of warm ale and a turn sitting closest to the hearth. A luxury, because let's be honest, only one person at a time gets truly warm in winter. Everyone else plays musical chairs with heat. You notice something as you sip. The little cross you brought back from the woods is tucked beside the fire. Now, your mother must have placed it there. You can't decide if it's a superstition, a prayer, or just habit. Afternoon turns gray, the kind of gray that swallows light. You help your brother mend a rabbit snare, though neither of you has seen a rabbit in weeks. He swears he saw Prince yesterday, and you don't have the heart to correct him. Later, you and your father haul a log to the chopping block. It's too big, and your arms ache before you even raise the axe. Still, you swing over and over until your shoulders burn and your hands go blister raw. He nods once. High praise. The wood splits with a final crack that echoes through the trees. You drag the pieces home. Your cloak is stiff with ice. Your lips are cracked. But that firewood means one more night you won't shiver quite as hard. Evening. Again. You hang your cloak to dry, throw a fresh log on the hearth, and sit down to the same soup you've had every day for a month. You wish for meat, or even garlic. You get cabbage. But the fire is glowing. The house smells of smoke and dry pine. Someone tells a story about a ghost in the village well. Someone else farts again. It's all very atmospheric. You go to bed knowing two things. One, your boots will still be wet tomorrow. And two, you'll get up and do it all again. Because winter doesn't care if you're tired, but neither do you. You wake to coughing. Not yours this time. It's your sister's. A deep, rattling kind that echoes off the rafters. You sit up slowly, blinking through the cold. The hearth has died down again. The air feels like it's holding a grudge. You pull the blanket tighter, watching as your sister curls into herself, her breath visible with every wheeze. This is the not-so-romantic part of medieval winter. Sickness, colds, flus, fevers, none of them respect age or status. They creep in through cracked doors and shared spoons, nestle into damp beds, and wait for the right moment to turn a sniffle into something much worse. You shuffle to the fire and toss on a few of the precious twigs you helped collect yesterday. It flares reluctantly, a small pop of life in the gloom. The light casts long shadows over the wooden beams. Your mother's already moving, pulling herbs from a pouch. Elderflower, yarrow, a little dried thyme. If it grows in a hedge, she's tried to boil it. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval medicine was largely herbal, based on a blend of observation, superstition, and the theories of long-dead Greeks. People didn't know about bacteria. They believed in imbalanced humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, and tried to rebalance the body with whatever they had, leeches, purging, or prayer. You sit beside your sister, hold her hand. Her forehead is warm. Her nose is raw from wiping. You offer her a sip of warm broth. She sniffs it like it might bite, then sips with a soft whimper. Outside, snow falls. Again. Of course it does. You and your brother are sent to fetch fresh snow to melt for water. Ironic, isn't it? Your whole world is made of the stuff, and you still have to gather it by the armful and dump it into a pot. It melts slowly. You watch. It shrink, steam curling upward like ghostly fingers. The broth begins to bubble. Your mother adds a crushed clove of garlic. Not because it helps, necessarily, but because she once heard a monk say it would keep the ill winds away. At this point, it's garlic or nothing. And here's a quirky tidbit. People in some villages believed illness came from elf shot, invisible darts fired by mischievous spirits. If you were hit, you'd fall ill. Some wore charms carved with runes or wrapped red thread around ailing limbs to keep the elves away. Your grandmother used to keep a pouch of nettles under her pillow for just that reason. You always thought it was an excuse to keep the kids out of her bed. You glance over at your sister again. She's fallen asleep. Still coughing, but softer. Now. The rest of the house carries on in whispered voices. Someone goes to check the roof again. Someone stirs the coals for warmth. You huddle under your cloak, sipping broth, listening to the wind moan like a sad bagpipe outside. You've learned the signs of worse illness. Fever that doesn't break. Lips turning blue. That hollow sound in the chest. And though historians still argue whether peasants had any effective system for quarantine, one thing's clear. If a cough turned wet and heavy, people worried. With no real medicine, no doctors for miles, and no money even if there were, sickness became a waiting game. You lie back and think about that time a few winters ago when half the village caught something. The old man who carved spoons didn't make it, nor did the baker's wife. You remember watching their bodies carried out in silence, wrapped in cloth, buried in frozen soil. The church bells didn't ring for long. Still, people survived. Most of them. You did. The day goes slowly. You make simple remedies. Onion poultices for the chest, mustard seeds mixed with vinegar for the throat. You grind herbs with a stone, mix honey and herbs for a cough drink. It tastes awful. Your brother makes a face and says it tastes like sweaty bees. You laugh, even though your lips are chapped and cracked. By mid-afternoon, your sister seems steadier. She's sitting up, sipping slowly. A little color returns to her face. The fire is brighter now. You've moved the blanket-covered bedroll closer to the hearth so she can feel the heat. Your mother wipes her forehead, murmurs a soft blessing. You repeat it under your breath, just in case. Later, you go out to fetch more snow. It's still falling. The whole world feels muffled, like someone wrapped the village in cotton. No footsteps, no bird song, just white. On the way back, you spot a bundle of herbs hanging from a neighbor's door. Wormwood, sage, and dried marigold. Protection from disease, they say. Whether it works or not, it smells nice. And honestly, half of surviving winter is psychological warfare. If it smells like spring, maybe spring will get the hint. You return with your snow. Your mother melts it, pours a little into a cup with honey and thyme. You help your sister sip. Her eyes flutter sleepily. She leans into the warmth. Dinner is barely a thought today, just warm broth again. But it's something. You sit close to the fire, 3 of you in a row like hens roosting. The wind howls louder now, scraping at the shutters like claws. You glance toward the tiny herb bundle by the door and pretend it's working. Someone tells a quiet story. A fox that tricked a priest. A girl who spoke with wolves. Stories have healing power too. Even if they don't cure coughs, they mend something else, something internal. The fire dims again. You tuck your sister into her blanket, pat her head, and curl up nearby, close enough to reach her if she stirs. Far enough that your own cough doesn't wake her. Before sleep claims you, you whisper the prayer your mother taught you, for warmth in the cold, for breath that stays, for the light that finds us, even in the longest nights. You let the words carry. You into dreams. The sun hasn't risen, but you wake to a different kind of light. Not sunlight. Don't be silly. It's the flicker of flame licking the bottom of the hearth again, casting orange against the low beams. But more than that, it's the glow of small relief. Your sister's breathing has softened. No wheeze, no panic, just sleep. You rise slowly, every joint a complaint. You're sore from worry, stiff from sleeping, curled like a parchment scroll. The fire needs feeding, and so do you. There's a scrap of bread left, and some of last night's broth. You sop up what's left, grateful that it tastes faintly of time and not just boiled misery. Then it's time to face another essential task of surviving winter, maintaining your tools. Remember that axe you used to split wood? It's chipped now. Not that it was exactly Excalibur to begin with. Medieval peasant tools were often crude. Repaired and repurposed. A hatchet today, a door wedge tomorrow. But if your axe can't split, then the fire can't burn. And if the fire can't burn, well, you probably don't need a spoiler. So you lug it to the small shed beside the house. Shed might be generous. It's a lean-to made from rotted planks and prayer. The snow here has crusted into a hard sheet. You knock it away, open the crooked door, and step inside. Inside, you lay your tools out on a flat stone. There's the axe, a small sickle, the grain flail, each with its own unique complaint. Dull blades, splintered handles, rust creeping in like mold on old bread. You take out a whetstone. This part takes patience. You begin to sharpen the axe. A smooth motion, back and forth, the sound of metal. On stone is oddly comforting, like something alive saying, "I'm still here." You feel the edge slowly return. You test it with a thumb, not quite razor sharp, but it'll bite wood again. Mainstream historical fact incoming. Sharpening tools wasn't just a peasant chore. It was a weekly survival ritual. A dull sickle could mean a ruined harvest. A chipped spade might turn sowing into suffering. And you couldn't just stroll into a medieval Home Depot. You had to make do with what you had, or barter with a village smith who probably hated you for never bringing enough charcoal. You fix a few, more edges, wrap a leather cord around a loose handle, tighten it with beeswax from a dwindling lump. Beeswax fixes everything, apparently. Blisters, tool grips, even candle wicks. One peasant you knew used it on cracked lips. It made them taste like honeyed dirt. As you work, your younger brother wanders in. He watches you in silence, his nose red and leaking slightly. You hand him a small file and tell him to smooth the handle splinters. He looks proud, like you just knighted him. Outside, the wind's shifting. You can hear it dragging against the roof. You finish with the sickle and wrap the tools in cloth before heading back inside. As you cross the threshold, you pause. There's a dead bird frozen stiff on the doorstep. A small sparrow, wings half open, eyes wide in that eternal way. You nudge it aside gently, half wincing, half praying. There's an old belief that if a bird dies at your door, it's an omen. Of what? No one can agree. Historians still argue whether such signs were seen as warnings, blessings, or just unfortunate wildlife placement. But your mother, seeing the bird, gathers some salt and sprinkles it in a circle around the hearth. She doesn't explain, and you don't ask. Everyone has their rituals. You warm your hands by the fire, then set the sharpened tools near the door. Tomorrow, you'll need them to dig out the path again. For now, it's rest time, because the second big task of winter survival, after not dying, is knowing when to sit down before you collapse. Your mother hands you a scrap of linen to mend. It's your winter tunic, frayed under the arms, seams loose. You groan. Sewing is not your forte. But she gives you that, do it, or I'll make you do it twice, look. So you sit by the fire and start threading the needle, your fingers thick and clumsy. You make a few crooked stitches, curse under your breath, and then correct them. Slowly, methodically, the fabric comes back to life. Here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Some peasants stitched small blessing knots into the hems of their winter clothes. Tiny, deliberate twists meant to trap warmth or ward off chill spirits. You try one just for fun. It looks like a confused caterpillar, but you tell yourself it has power. Outside, the sun finally peeks through the clouds. A weak, watery light spills across the snow. You step outside to catch a few minutes of it, squinting like a mole. The snow glitters, and for a moment, just a moment, it's almost beautiful. You see smoke rising from a neighbor's chimney. You wave. They wave back. That's the third unspoken rule of winter. Keep an eye on each other. If someone's chimney stops smoking for too long, you go knock, or break in, or dig them out. Back inside, your sister's sitting up now, sipping water. You ruffle her hair, careful not to catch a cough. Later you use your mended tunic as a makeshift barrier for the door, just enough to block the worst of the drafts. You pile straw in the corners where cold leaks in. It's not elegant, but this isn't a palace. It's a battlefield. As evening arrives, your family gathers around the hearth. Someone tells a story about a man who fell in love with a winter spirit. She melted when he touched her. You all groan. Classic tale. Still, it gets passed around like bread. You glance toward the sharpened axe, the mended tunic, the steaming pot, the warm faces. You're surrounded by so many tiny victories. None of them flashy, but each one another reason you're still here. The fire cracks. Someone snores. Someone mutters in their sleep. You lie down beside your brother, the warmth between your backs, shared like a secret. Outside, the cold creeps closer, but you're ready for it. Morning arrives quietly, not with a grand sunrise, but with a shift in tone. The cold softens slightly, the wind hushes to a moody murmur, and light begins to seep through the warped wooden slats of your walls. It's a fragile kind of hope, a maybe kind of day. You stretch beneath your blanket cocoon, hearing the muted sounds of stirring bodies. Your sister is breathing steadily. Your mother is already up, naturally, probably grinding oats or boiling something that tastes suspiciously. Like everything else you've eaten since December, you sit up, tug on your newly mended tunic, and brace yourself. It's clean-up day. See, in winter, the mess doesn't magically pause just because it's cold enough to freeze your nose hairs. If anything, it multiplies. Damp straw starts to smell. Rodents find cozy corners. Mold sneaks into bread bins and firewood. The worst part? Everything's harder to clean when water freezes in the bucket before you finish scrubbing. You start with the sleeping area. You fold the bedding and hang it near the fire. Not that it'll fully dry, but it might at least stop smelling like wet sheep. You sweep the floor with a twig broom, dislodging a scandalous amount of dirt, crumbs, and what looks suspiciously like a beetle wing. Mainstream historical fact time. Peasants often lived in one-room homes shared with animals. Not just the occasional cat or chicken, but full-sized livestock, cows, pigs, goats, especially during deep winter. Their body heat helped warm the home. Your family's lucky. You only have a few chickens, and they mostly keep to the corner near the back door. Still, the occasional squawk in the middle of the night reminds you that privacy is a modern luxury. You move to the pantry shelf, where what's left of the apples are turning into science experiments. One has grown a noble beard of fuzz. You toss it outside for the birds, or whatever's braving this frost. Then you wipe the shelf down with a cloth soaked in boiled vinegar. Not for the smell, obviously. It reeks, but it helps with mold, or so the local wise woman swears. Your mother is scouring the cooking pot with ashes. Not soap, ashes. Because in a world without Palmolive, you use what you've got. The abrasive ash scrubs away the grime, and the heat of the fire sterilizes the rest. Sort of. Don't think too hard about it. Your younger brother is assigned to shovel out the waste corner. His face says everything. You throw him a sympathetic glance as he opens the door and disappears outside, dragging a bucket of yesterday's regrets behind him. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some peasants believed that spilled milk in winter was a bad omen, that it might invite hunger or frost spirits. So people were extra careful not to waste it. You once saw a neighbor mutter an apology to the floor after dropping a ladle. That same man later buried an onion to ward off snow rot. He might not have been all there. Or maybe he just knew something you didn't. You return to your task. The straw beneath the bed is damp and sour. You rake it out, gagging a little, then replace it with the driest handfuls from the bundle in the corner. It smells better instantly. like hay in faint sunshine. Halfway through your cleaning, your aunt drops by. She stomps the snow from her boots and brings a gift, soap root, a lumpy, dried ball that foams when rubbed with water. Your mother thanks her like she brought diamonds. This will go straight into the wash bucket tomorrow, if the water doesn't freeze solid first. The two women chat in low tones. You catch words like illness and father's cough and missing goat, standard winter gossip. You try not to eavesdrop, but in a house this small, even secrets have to whisper in code. Then, unexpectedly, a guest. A knock at the door. Everyone pauses. No one knocks in winter unless it's important or dangerous. Your mother opens the door. A man stands there, wrapped in a thick cloak, snow coating his shoulders. The village reeve. He's doing his rounds, checking that each household is holding on. His beard is frosted, and he looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. He asks a few questions. Everyone well? Any signs of illness? Still have enough food? You nod, and your mother offers him a spoonful of warm porridge. He accepts, gratefully. You learn that another family, 2 fields over, isn't faring so well. Their only cow slipped on ice and broke its leg. The animal will be slaughtered early, but it means no milk until spring. Worse, they lost their only axe last week. The handle split. They've been borrowing from others. You make a note to offer yours. You sharpened it yesterday, after all. And in winter, charity is less about kindness and more about survival math. Help now, and someone might help you when your roof collapses or your stew runs out. The reeve moves on. Your mother closes the door and exhales. You didn't realize she was holding her breath. You return to your cleaning. The windows are so clouded you can't see out of them. You scrape the frost away with a spoon. Just outside, snowbanks huddle, like tired ghosts. And there, across the yard, a line of paw prints, too big to be a dog. You stare a moment too long, then shrug it off. It's probably just a fox, probably. By mid-afternoon, the house feels lighter, still cold, still cramped, but cleaner. The air doesn't smell quite as defeated. You light a bundle of dried rosemary near the hearth, not for warmth, but for smell. And maybe, just maybe, to invite better spirits in. Historians still argue whether winter cleaning was primarily about sanitation or superstition. Was it to keep illness away, or misfortune, or simply to stave off madness from staring at the same walls every day? You're not sure, but it helps. Dinner is simple again. You mash what's left of yesterday's turnips into a grayish pile and add salt. Your mother adds a few crumbled herbs. It almost tastes good. You imagine it's roasted goose, a trick of the tongue. That night, as you lie in your newly cleaned corner, you feel something strange. Calm. The tools are ready. The beds are dry. The straw is fresh. And for a moment, however brief, the cold hasn't won yet. You wake to the sound of nothing. Not the crackle of the hearth, not the coughing of your mother, not even your brother's usual snoring that sounds like a goat trying to sing. Just an eerie silence, as if the world outside pressed pause. You sit up quickly, heart hammering. The coals in the hearth have gone cold. The air stings your throat with every breath. The fog of your exhale hangs in the room like a ghost refusing to leave. And then it hits you. Last night's fire wasn't banked properly. A rookie mistake. You, Scramble over to the hearth, kneel, and prod the ashes. Maybe, just maybe. But no, not even a hint of ember. The fire is well and truly dead. Your mother is awake now too, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. No yelling, just the look. The disappointed one that says, "You'll remember next time, won't you?" She doesn't have to say it. This is a crisis. No fire in the dead of winter means no warmth, no cooking, no boiling water for washing, and, most dangerous of all, no ability to dry out wet clothes. In other words, hypothermia is backstage, warming up. You know what has to be done. You throw on your thickest layers, 2 tunics, a wool hood, socks that don't match and don't matter. The goal isn't style, it's survival. You stomp into your boots, grab the axe, still sharp from your care the other day, and head for the door. You're going to need more than dry wood this time. You're going to need coals from a neighbor's fire. Mainstream historical fact incoming. This practice was common in medieval villages. If a household's fire went out, they'd carry a clay pot or lidded pan to a neighbor and humbly ask for embers. It was so widespread that some communities even had official fire lenders, people with sturdier hearths who always kept extra coals just in case. You trudge out into the cold, the snow crunching under your feet like stale bread. Your breath is thick in the air, and even the chickens look offended by how frigid it is. Neighbor number 1 is too far to risk, the path's buried. But the older widow down the lane usually keeps a good fire. You aim for her hut, stepping carefully across a frozen patch near the well, half expecting to fall on your backside. You knock. No answer. You knock again, louder. A curtain rustles. The door creaks. She peers out, eyes narrowed like a cat who knows she's about to be asked for something. You explain. She nods, wordless, then returns with a small pot of glowing embers, sealed with a piece of slate. She hands it to you with both hands. "Don't drop it," she says. Like you needed the reminder. You thank her and start back home, gripping the pot like it's the Holy Grail. Because, in this moment, it is. Halfway back, a gust of wind threatens to scatter everything. You curl around the pot, shielding it with your cloak. Your hands are shaking, but not from the cold, from the sheer tension of walking a fire baby across an ice field. You make it. You slide the pot carefully into the hearth, tuck dry twigs around it, and blow. Gently, patiently, a flicker, a curl of smoke. Then flame. Relief hits you like warm water. The fire roars to life, and the house begins to breathe again. Your mother claps you on the back, and for once, she doesn't even mention the earlier mistake. You both know the lesson's been branded into your brain like a family crest. Once, the room warms a little. It's time to handle the next critical winter survival strategy. Layer management. Yeah, it doesn't sound heroic. But keeping warm in medieval times wasn't just about huddling by the fire. It was about understanding how to use your limited clothing effectively. Wool on linen, cloak over everything, keep your head covered, and, crucially, don't let sweat stay on your skin. That's right. You can overheat in the cold, and if you do, and your sweat chills you, that's a one-way ticket to Feverland. So, you start a careful cycle. Warm near the fire, then back off. Let your body regulate. You dry your damp socks by tying them to a stick and holding them near the flame. You rotate shoes, letting one pair rest by the hearth while the other survives outdoors. Your mother begins warming stones again. Tonight, they'll be wrapped and placed at everyone's feet in bed. You grab the iron pot from its hook and start heating water for porridge, yes, but also because the steam adds a touch of precious moisture to the air. Without it, your nose would dry out like old leather. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some peasants used to place hot stones in dried animal bladders, wrapping them in cloth as primitive hot water bottles. Sound gross? It is. But it worked. And let's be honest, you'd use one right now without hesitation. Later, as you sit by the rekindled fire, you notice your little brother staring into the flames. "Do fire spirits live in there?" he asks. Half whisper. You grin. "Only if you're kind to them." He nods, very serious, then offers a crust of bread to the fire like a tiny, hungry god. You let him. Outside, the snow starts again. Gently this time. Big, slow flakes drifting past the window. There's a calm to it, a rhythm. Winter's not always cruel. Sometimes it just asks for patience. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers believed in elemental spirits like fire gods or hearth beings. What's clear, though, is that fire was treated with respect, almost reverence. It wasn't just warmth, it was protection, light, life. You shift your chair slightly closer to the flame, not too close, just enough. By bedtime, the hearth is glowing again, the coals properly banked this time. You press a warm stone to your feet beneath the covers and listen to the wind whisper across the roof. Tonight, your house is a fortress. Your fire is alive, and you're not afraid of the dark. Morning arrives as a whiteout. You open the door to a wall of snow that wasn't there yesterday. The drift has climbed halfway up the frame like a stubborn beast trying to get inside. For a second, you consider closing the door and pretending you didn't see it. But reality, and the sound of someone sneezing in the background, won't let you. This is what folks call a proper freeze, the kind that stops carts mid-journey, that cracks wooden buckets down the middle and kills chickens still standing. The kind of cold that makes you question why humans ever thought living this far north was a good idea. Today's not about cleaning or cooking, not even gathering. Today is about surviving the storm indoors. Full stop. You close the door against the snow monster and help your mother fasten the crossbar. The wind howls like it's mad you denied it entry. It'll have to settle for clawing at the thatch. With travel impossible and fuel limited, the goal becomes singular: contain heat, conserve energy. First, you check the fire. It's good, well banked, a slow red pulse in the center. You feed it a few small logs, the driest ones, and drape a blanket across the doorway to trap warmth in the main room. It helps. Not much, but every bit counts when your teeth are already flirting with chattering. You pull out the thickest blankets and create a den near the fire, a family nest where everyone can huddle during the worst of the cold. Your sister brings the baby. Your brother carries the sleeping straw. You take the side nearest the door, because let's be honest, you're kind of the bravest. It's cramped. Elbows in ribs, someone's foot in your back. But it's warmer, already. Mainstream historical fact. On especially brutal days, medieval families would go into what we might call hibernation mode. Daily tasks slowed. Meals became minimal. People shared body heat in tight quarters, and the entire household might nap multiple times a day to conserve energy. Forget productivity. This was the medieval version of airplane mode, Lunch is barely a blip. A few hard bits of rye bread, dipped in thin broth and passed around like treasure. You chew slowly, partly to stretch it, partly because it's like eating a brick. Even the chickens are quiet today, huddled in the back room under an old cloak. You imagine they're having a tiny poultry prayer circle, begging the frost gods for mercy. The day passes slowly. Light filters in faint and blue. And time becomes this weird stretchy thing. You nap. You wake. You nap again. Your sister tells a story about a village girl who froze into a statue but came back to life in spring. Your brother insists he saw a wolf outside. Your mother smirks and throws a boot at him, gently. You need something to break the cabin fever, before it eats you alive. So you play knuckle bones, a game made from sheep bones, flicked and tossed like primitive dice. You try to keep it quiet, but inevitably someone gets too competitive, and the bones go skittering under the bench. Cue groaning. Cue your brother crawling after them and smacking his head. Quirky tidbit alert. Some medieval families would tell fortunes during blizzards, using everything from flickering candlelight to stew bubbles to, yes, game pieces like knuckle bones. The line between entertainment and superstition was razor thin. You stare at the bones a little longer than usual, wondering if they're trying to tell you something. Maybe, please, invent central heating. By mid-afternoon, the room smells like wool, stew, and people who've been cooped up too long. Not terrible, just lived in. The wind picks up again. The roof creaks. You hear it? Faint at first. Then clearer. A cry. Outside. Everyone stops. You move to the door. No one speaks, but you all feel the tension pulling tight like a string. You open it carefully, letting in a burst of frigid air and flurries. There, barely visible, a figure staggering through the snow. You shout. The figure stumbles again. You run. It's a man, soaked to the skin, half frozen. You recognize him, the Thatcher's nephew. He'd been sent to check the livestock at the outskirts. He got caught in the drift. You drag him inside. The warmth hits him like a wall. He groans. Your mother takes over instantly, barking orders you've never heard her say so quickly. Blankets, hot stones, broth, socks off. You help without asking. You've seen this before. Last year someone didn't make it home in time. Frost doesn't. Ask permission. It just takes. Slowly the man stirs. He shivers uncontrollably, but he's alive. Your mother whispers thanks to whoever's listening. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers had consistent methods for treating frostbite or hypothermia. Some records suggest they rubbed frozen limbs with snow. Others mention warm cloth or goose fat. What's clear is they knew the signs and knew how fast things could turn. By the time night falls, the wind has calmed a little. The fire glows steady. The stranger snores like he's trying to saw through the wall, and the house feels full. Crowded, yes, but full of something else, too. Resilience. You're reminded of something the priest once said during a winter sermon, between awkward coughs and complaints about his own cold feet. Winter doesn't test your strength. It tests your patience with weakness. You didn't get it then. You get it now. Later, as the household settles, you lie back in the nest of blankets, one arm behind your head, listening to your siblings breathe. You're exhausted, but it's a peaceful kind of tired. Your fire didn't go out. Your walls didn't cave in, and despite the worst blizzard so far, you and yours, still here, still warm, still winning. You wake up to silence again, but this time, the good kind. No screaming wind, no creaking roof, just the soft pop of the fire and someone gently snoring nearby. You stretch, stiff from sleeping shoulder to shoulder in the human burrito roll of medieval winter survival. Your feet are warm for once, wrapped around one of yesterday's hearthstones. The storm has passed. You push the door open and squint into the morning light. Everything is blanketed in white, not just dusted, smothered. The snow curves across the field in gentle swells, like icing over a forgotten cake. It's beautiful in that way. Things are beautiful when you know they almost killed you. You take a deep breath of that sharp, clean air, the kind that slices your nose hairs and makes you wonder why people pay for minty toothpaste when this exists. Today is not about endurance. Today is about emerging, recovering, digging out, both literally and mentally. The first task? Path clearing. You and your brother grab spades and start carving a narrow trench from the door to the main walking path. It's wet snow now, heavy and grudging. Each scoop is a tiny battle. But you keep at it, because mobility is power in a village like this. You need to get to the barn, the neighbors, the well. Besides, it beats being inside, where your sister is already singing again, loudly and off-key. By midday, the path is cleared, and a few neighbors emerge, blinking like bears coming out of hibernation. You exchange nods. The universal post-blizzard greeting, "We made it." The older widow from 2 doors down waves you over. You trudge over, boots squeaking. She hands you a warm bun, actual bread, made fresh. "Thanks for helping my roof last week," she says. You didn't even think she noticed. Mainstream historical fact time. In tightly knit medieval villages, mutual aid wasn't just nice, it was non-negotiable. You helped your neighbors not out of generosity, but out of the certainty that one day you'd need them just as badly. Without state support, these networks of reciprocity were the true social safety nets. Back home, the Thatcher's nephew has recovered enough to eat and insult your cooking, which is probably a sign he's feeling better. You let it slide. His boots are still drying by the fire. With the road somewhat passable, daily rhythms return, but in a quieter way. No one rushes. Everything feels softened, as if the storm pressed a thumb into time and left a dent. You help with wood gathering again, because your stockpile took a serious hit. This time, you bring back more than just branches. You haul in a fallen tree limb, half buried under snow. It's damp, heavy, and will take forever to dry. But next month, that thing's gold. Inside, your mother stews what's left of the beans. The fire smells of pine, and the room, though small, feels full of oxygen again, full of life. You sit by the fire and fidget with some string, twisting it into a shape vaguely resembling a dog. Your sister makes one too, but insists hers is a dragon. You don't argue. Quirky tidbit incoming. Some medieval children's toys were made entirely of leftover things. Twine animals, carved sticks, even dolls made of bundled straw and rags. They had names, personalities, and, in your household at least, the occasional sword duel. The afternoon passes in that odd after-snow calm. Outside, the world is a silver mirror. Inside, you fix a leak in the roof with pitch and straw, then help reinforce the chicken coop wall that collapsed during the storm. Good thinking, your mother mutters, almost like a compliment, by late. Evening, a neighbor swings by with news. The priest's roof collapsed and his goat is missing. Again, your mother sighs. You offer to help. She gives you a look. You go anyway. At the priest's, the situation is less dire than dramatic. The roof's mostly intact. The goat is hiding behind a barrel, and the priest, clearly shaken, is muttering. Something about divine punishment and goatius disappearus. You pretend not to laugh. Still, community cleanup begins. You help patch the priest's thatch. Your brother finds the goat and names it Snowball. The name doesn't stick, but it gets a few laughs. Later, back at home, as the last light slips away, your mother lights a tallow candle and sets it near the window. A beacon. Not for navigation, but for hope, for proof. That in the darkest, coldest nights, a little glow still cuts through. You settle in again, but this time, without the frantic bundling. Just 2 blankets, and the warmth of an actual cooked stew in your belly, a luxury. You look at the fire, now calm, steady, and it hits you. This rhythm, this dance with the cold, is what winter survival really is. Not one big battle, but thousands of little ones. Dozens of tiny, silent choices. Add a log, bank the coals, eat the last root, knock on the widow's door, pull the neighbor out of a snowdrift. Historians still argue whether peasant resilience came from necessity or culture, whether it was beaten into them by hardship or handed down like folklore. Maybe it was both. What's clear is that somehow people kept choosing to go on, day after day, snowstorm after snowstorm, with no tech, no luxury, no backup plan. And you're one of them now. Someone knocks. The door opens. It's the priest, holding a goat and a bottle of what might be cider. He doesn't say much, just raises the bottle and grins. Your mother laughs for the first time in days. You all take a sip. The fire flickers. The storm has passed. And tonight, you're not just warm, you're whole. The days grow slightly longer now, just a sliver more light sneaking in before breakfast. The kind of faint golden stretch that makes you squint and wonder if spring is teasing you. But winter's far from over. You know better than to trust. A single warm breeze. Still, the worst seems behind you. You wake to the rhythmic creak of a cartwheel outside. Someone hauling chopped wood, a beautiful sound in its own scratchy way. Your joints ache, but not unbearably. Your breath still fogs in the air, but it no longer feels like you're exhaling chunks of your soul. Today's rhythm is almost gentle. You head out to help mend the thatch roof on a neighbor's shed, your hands wrapped in cloth to avoid frostbite. Your boots still damp from yesterday, but a bit less crusted with ice. The sun peeks through clouds like a shy child, lighting up the snow in blinding flashes. You pause at the well, drop the bucket, crank. It creaks, and you brace for the thunk of the ice. But instead, there's a splash. You grin. Running water again. Inside. The shed, someone's tried to insulate with hay packed between the beams. Primitive, yes, but effective. You help refill the gaps, hammer down some fresh planks, and reinforce the door with a crossbar. By noon, you're steaming from exertion. Not just surviving winter anymore, outwitting it. Mainstream historical fact. Villagers often reused livestock, bedding, soiled straw and hay, as insulation for walls and floors. It was messy and mildly fragrant, but in a peasant home, warmth trumped dignity. These layers became essential in sealing out drafts, and in many cases acted as rudimentary padding against both the cold and the damp. As you head home for a midday meal, you notice how many footprints now pepper the once smooth snowbanks. Trails. From the smithy, the priest's hut, the animal pens. People are out again. The world feels reconnected. Your sister meets you at the door with a bowl of something vaguely edible. Mostly parsnip, mostly not horrible. She's added a pinch of dried something, maybe wild mint. You're not sure, but it works. And now, the thing no one dares say aloud. Maybe it's safe to dream again. The men gather by the fire that evening, talking repairs and planting cycles. The talk is light. Someone jokes about getting a cow drunk on fermented turnips. Another suggests making a skating rink by accident near the manure heap. The laughter is cautious, like the ground might still crack underneath it, but it's laughter all the same. Quirky tidbit alert. Some medieval peasants did in fact make sleds and ice skates using animal bones strapped to their shoes. There's even record of impromptu races down frozen roads. Dangerous, stupid, and exactly the kind of fun you'd invent when there's nothing else to do for 3 months. You climb into bed later that night and realize the house is quiet. Not the scary kind of quiet from the blizzard. This is peace. You can hear the crackling fire, the lazy breathing of your family, even the chicken in the back room making soft content noises. It's the first time in weeks you don't feel like you need to sleep with one ear open. Before you drift off, you stare at the ceiling and think about how far you've come, from shivering under 3 cloaks with a candle stub, to tonight, full belly, warm toes, and a little room to hope. Historians still argue whether this kind of winter resilience was sustainable long-term, or if it simply wore people down across generations. Some say it forged tight-knit communities of steel. Others suggest it shortened lifespans and dulled dreams. But in the moment, all that matters is that you made it through. You're not just surviving anymore. You're rebuilding. Tomorrow you'll haul firewood, maybe help dig out the chapel, or start scoping out the fields, wondering when the soil will thaw. You don't say it out loud, but you're ready for spring. You dream of green things, of warmth on your back, sun-drenched walks to the river, fresh herbs in the stew. You know you've still got weeks of cold ahead, maybe months, but winter doesn't scare you now, because winter's not a villain, it's a test. And you passed. Now take a deep breath. Let the fire's final crackles fade into your imagination, slow and steady like glowing coals easing into ash. The storm has passed. The winds are still. The roof holds. You've traveled through the darkest stretch of medieval winter, not just with layers and hot stones, but with instinct, grit, and that rare kind of humor only hardship breeds. You felt your fingers numb, your belly rumble, your spirits flicker, then rally again. But now the world rests. Picture yourself back on that straw-stuffed bed, thick blankets up to your chin, the soft scratch of wool against your skin, the air just warm enough to keep the cold at bay. Outside, frost still clings to the trees, but inside there's comfort. Candles sputter down to golden nubs. A chicken murmurs in its sleep. Your family breathes in rhythm with the room. You made it through the long night, and when spring comes, because it will, you'll be stronger for it, wiser, more attuned to the tiny miracles, warm bread, dry socks, an extra log on the fire. So, let your mind drift now. Float on that memory of crisp snow underfoot, of steam rising from a bowl of stew, of laughter echoing off cold stone walls. You're safe here. You're warm. You've survived the coldest nights, without fireplaces, without tech, just like they did. And now, slowly, gently, let sleep take over. Good night, traveler. You earned it.